program, and this panel, we will be diving into brand activations, and we will discuss and learn how brands can build a strategy for the Metaverse and GameFi. Before jumping in, for all of you tuning in, again, there will be a Q&A session at the end of every panel. So if you have any questions, do feel free to drop them in the box so that the moderators could actually read them after, or feel free to interact with the chat box. Now, moderating this session on brand activation will be Tricia from Tribe, and we'll be hearing from various viewpoints. Publicis as an advertising agency, Petromil from the brand Volkswagen, and a venture representative, Danny from Konvoy Ventures. Let's get on started. Over to you, Tricia.
Hi, and thanks, I think, for that introduction. So I think before I introduce the speakers here, if you guys are new to Web3, just wanted to say, that it is very unheard of, especially in the Web3 market currently with the Metaverse by extension, right? That such loyal online communities have been developing. I think if people are not aware, for example, Bored Apes, you have Goblin Town, you have Moonbirds as well. These are communities that have been growing extensively. We have seen these projects grow from just out of someone's house to now actually bigger, larger brands on their own, like Yuga Labs. I think with us today, we actually have 3 very cool individuals who are looking to break new ground in helping Web2 brands establish, and understand how Web3 natives work. And of course, what are some of these ways, we can actually utilize to reach out to the emerging audience here. So I think with that, I just wanted to introduce in this order, Danielle, Jean-Francois, and Petromil, just so that, you guys can introduce yourselves and what you guys do. And if anything, we can take the conversation forward thereafter. Yeah, but Danielle, please go ahead.
Sure. My name is Danny. I'm an investor at Konvoy, who is an early stage VC that's 100% focused on investing in the gaming and interactive entertainment industries. We do have a specific focus in investing in the tech infrastructure and platforms that support these industries versus making investments in developers making traditional standalone games. Currently, 2 of our portfolio companies are the most publicly known for their partnerships with brands. The first one is Ready Player Me, who is building an avatar platform that will bring one's digital identity across virtual worlds. They've partnered with popular Web2 brands such as Dior, New Balance, Adidas, as well as popular Web3 projects such as CryptoPunks. The second is GameFam. They are a game developer and publisher that specializes in making games and experiences by pairing native Roblox developers with brands. Their most recent partnership was with Wowie, which is a toy maker, to create a doll that enables interactive play across virtual and physical worlds. But they've also partnered with known gaming brands. Their partnership with Sega in creating a Sonic experience in Roblox was actually the first time that a AAA gaming character has been brought into Roblox. And one of my areas of interest specifically is in the digital identity and expression space. I'm looking forward to seeing and facilitating more fashion brands entering popular gaming-centric worlds.
Thanks, Danny. That was actually quite interesting. I think, honestly, digital fashion and digital identity is something that's definitely going to be explored even more so as we progress in the Metaverse. So I think next up, before we begin, could I get John, just your help to introduce yourself and of course what you do?
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Jean. I currently work at Publicis as the head of growth. So my role kind of straddles a little bit Web2 and Web3. On one hand, most of my day is taken up helping clients find their footing in the region, developing their go-to-market and the commercial strategy. On the other side of that equation is also helping our client partners sort of navigate the complexities of Web3. It's a very nascent space, especially in the world of brand marketing and advertising. There's a lot of education, there's a lot of thought leadership, and part of my role is in sort of helping to hold our clients' hands as they enter this from many different vantage points. Another part of my role, which is something which I'm also super invested in on a personal capacity and a professional capacity, is also identifying sort of products which can help solve some of our clients' problems in Web3. I heard on the earlier panel a lot of discussions around the advent of no-code software, whether or not we're able to make things more accessible for mass adoption. That's also an area which I'm particularly looking at because at the end of the day, and perhaps we'll talk more about this later, there's a lot of barriers of entry from both a brand, and depending on whether you're a local brand or whether you're a regional brand, it may not always be that simple to start onboarding people, especially when it comes down to things like tokens and cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of compliance and regulation issues. So I'm also on the lookout for solutions whereby we can adopt a plug and play method, right? Something that will allow our clients to still dip their toes into the space, try a hand at developing an NFT without actually having to go through the whole hoops of finding a developer, making sure that everything is tested. So yeah, just to sort of bring it back to what I do, I'm in the process of finding products that can help my clients open up doors in the metaverse, and as well as developing strategies for their go-to-market. But yeah, that's just a short summary about me. I'd love to hear more from everyone else later on the panel.
Thanks, John. I think it's interesting how in this panel we actually have a good mix of different individuals from the various sectors. I mean, we have Danny earlier, who's from BC. We have John now, who's actually from a communications and branding agency. And I think I just want to introduce Petromil next, who is coming from a corporate background and a consumer brand, so to speak, right? So Petromil, if you could please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you very much, Tricia, and also thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to join this panel. Maybe just a slight correction. Actually, I'm not representing a specific brand, but our whole Volkswagen Group. So Volkswagen Group has 13 brands, among the Volkswagen brand itself, also Audi, Porsche, the luxury segment of Bentley, Lamborghini, and all the way into trucks and bus businesses. So we have a quite extensive portfolio of mobility businesses. And actually, our goal at Volkswagen Group Innovation, this is actually what our organization is called, we're around 500 people globally, is to bring deep technology innovation or new topics actually to drive business revenue within the group. Yeah, so actually we transfer innovations from the different regions we are rooted in into our brands. Yeah. And we are located in 3 of our core markets, which is China, US, and Europe, where our headquarters is. We also have smaller hubs like the Singapore hub, which I am actually responsible for, in other locations such as Tokyo, Barcelona, Tel Aviv. In our historic evolvement started from more core topics for cars, such as battery technology, fuel cell, and so on. But now moving more and more into topics where we see potential new revenue pools, which are technology enabled. And actually looking into the topics of blockchain technology, customer facing applications, specifically looking into NFTs for loyalty, customer acquisition, and so on, is what topic we very actively work with our brands onto. And actually even Singapore is very well positioned on our side to provide this on the one side talent, but also potentially pilot environment for such projects for the group and our brands. Specifically in Volkswagen Group Innovation, we have 3 focus areas related to Metaverse and NFTs, which is first and foremost, we are helping our brands analyze a variety of use cases which NFTs are used for in customer facing role, but also within the broader Metaverse of virtual world systems. So this is extremely dynamic world, which is very different at pace from the automotive, very slow processes we have in product development. So we really see ourselves here as adding value for our brands. Another topic we're looking into is technology due diligence. Very often we get questions about, okay, so I'm going to have an airdrop for a specific purpose, which blockchain I need to run it on, and what are the implications of this? And last but not least, we are just tapping our toes into the topics of tokenomics and what implications tokenomics are going to have on business models, which are very different in the business models we are having now. And just to give you a couple of examples about what our brands have done and also we are actively involved in is, most of our luxury premium brands are the ones that are really pushing the envelope on this side. So they're kind of like the early adopters. And we are really starting very small here. So we're talking about collectibles and artworks, which has been launched. For example, Porsche launched last year a series of sketches by their director of exterior design, which were then sold for charity purposes to fans of Porsche. It's a limited edition. Also, Lamborghini did something quite interesting in the sense that in order to celebrate the last Lamborghini Aventador, which is one of their flagship models, which was still running on gasoline, is going to be switched to an electric vehicle. They created, I think, 5 NFTs, which were actually the QR code of them was engraved into a carbon fiber, which has been sent for tests to the International Space Station. and this is a quite unique art pieces in a physical and digital manner as well. And the art pieces themselves were quite detailed. There were more than 10,000 parts of real Lamborghini put into an art piece flying to the moon. But I'm just trying to show you that actually we are really starting like with a very small projects, and maybe the more forward-looking things that we already announced publicly was from our brand Cupra. I'm not sure if it's famous in Asia. It's very much a forward-looking brand in Spain. That they actually announced a virtual world. It's a virtual island where the customers of Cupra will be able to engage in a variety of co-creation activities, events, and more. And this is just the beginning. Bentley just last week, 2 weeks ago, announced they've also done have an airdrop of NFTs. So it's very exciting to be in the air at the moment.
Thanks, Petromil. No, I think what everyone has said here currently is spot on, right? And the biggest the biggest keyword actually that's been popping off currently is how all of you use NFTs in different ways. And that whether it's to engage your audience, whether it's to actually build something out that makes sense to a business and a brand, especially in the innovation sector. I just wanted to check, like what are some main trends you guys see emerging aside from NFTs, or with NFTs included, right? When it comes to building and marketing to a Web3 savvy audience in particular. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure either one of you could take the question first, or if Petromil have anything you'd like to add, please go ahead. Yeah.
John, you're muted. Maybe you could start if you want, or Daniel.
John looks like he's eager.
I'm okay to follow on.
Well, I think Danielle can answer this better because she's closer to the product side of the business. I think, I'll pass the stage to her first, and I'll add on from a community angle, because that's where mostly my background comes from.
Sure, I'll definitely jump in for the building part. So I think there's two main things for me. I think from a product point of view, I think products just need to be built so that anyone can understand, access, and utilize it. I think the fact of the matter is that a majority of people today are not Web3 savvy, and so that the immediate focus should be on increasing that accessibility understanding. I think the second one is creating something that feels like authentic, natural, and just overall additive to the people that are familiar with the brand. I think the theme that is emerging right now is creating kind of like one-off experiences in worlds that already exist. I think Roblox is the one that immediately comes to mind. I think a good example here is like Spotify's venture into Roblox. For those that are not familiar, what they're doing is they're creating themed islands for certain music genres, certain artists. And what this is really an extension of the connection that they already create between fans and the artists that they listen to by making that experience more immersive and exploratory.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, and it kind of segues into what I could talk about from where I'm sitting. I think, just building on the point on all these virtual worlds that brands are building, what we are starting to realize is a lot of these brands are empty, or the brand worlds are empty. Right, there's a graveyard of virtual worlds out there, and while there are some pioneering ones, especially in Roblox, like Nike Land or the Vans experience, and there are really some great interactive zones in which we've seen a lot of thought leadership come out of it in terms of pioneering the way brands can interact with their fans, and how do we generate new engagement models. By and large, I think the buck has kind of stopped there in terms of when it comes to people's opinions of what the metaverse is, or rather a larger extension what Web3 is. So definitely I agree with Danielle's point on education, but I do feel that we are still a long way to go before we are able to embrace mass adoption as a whole, right? For various reasons. Number one, security and trust and safety. We cannot onboard thousands and thousands of people, especially a brand can't onboard thousands of people if they are not able to protect them. And I think at the moment, what's happening is there's very little protection that's afforded to investors as a whole. Every other week we see hacks, every other week we see loopholes that have been created, funds being drained. It's very difficult for a brand to sort of willingly put an investment into something that's not going to be safe for their customers, right? And over the last 10, 15 years in Web2, brands have invested a tremendous amount of PR, a tremendous amount of money in ensuring that their product is safe. It's inclusive, it's diverse. They're hitting all the right notes. It's ESG. all those things can't just get thrown out of the window when it comes to Web3. And, that's the number one barrier. The other thing I think is use cases. Again, as what Danielle said, we are probably at a point whereby a lot of the things that we are seeing right now have ran the gauntlet, and the technology that we are currently working with or have to work with has sort of reached an inflection point whereby the speed of which people are getting into the space, the technology is not keeping up fast enough. And there's only so many things that marketing can cover. There's only so many things that campaigning or marketing to your community or keep people engaged can do. If the technology is not there, people are going to get bored and people are going to drop off. I know we have a lot of other questions that will tackle some of these topics later on. So maybe Petrov, you have something to add to what I just said.
Just taking on your last point, actually, I do believe accessibility, actually, this is the point of Daniel, but also what you mentioned about how actually you make the whole experience seamless is very important. And I already see certain events or certain triggers which might actually really open the gates for this adoption. This is an example. As recently Shopify announced that they'll be opening a login with Web3 login, actually like wallet login for their shops, which would potentially create a very easy way for our Web3 community and NFT community to get access to merchandise or specific products, right? So actually we are talking about already Web2 coming towards Web3, and I believe this is going to be something we're going to see more and more in the future of. In another area which is also quite close to my heart related to fan tokens, or social tokens specifically, is what we see of the likes of Socios, for example. We are very, very present amplifying the brand message of football clubs, for example, in Europe, which has quite high resonance. Of course, at the moment, you do not have so much of this transition between you're a passive or an active fan to something of a stakeholder, but you see more and more involvement of fans, for example, to define a playlist for training grounds or specific maybe locker room messages for the players and so on, something that it's very difficult to scale if you do not have this technology we have at the moment. So I do believe the more Web2 is transitioning to Web3, and actually you have these bridges between the older world and the newer world coming. We're going to see more and more seamless user experience that is going to bring more people onto platforms.
No, I think that was really well put. To be honest, what I'm hearing, I think, from everyone here is that, the power of community, the power of the user, it becomes more and more transparent as, we start to shift towards Web3. Things like accessibility, the usage of technology, and actually having solid use cases for these products become more and more important and pertinent to whether a business thrives, especially as it makes that transition. I think that actually leads us very nicely to the next question I actually have, because with the development of the metaverse, as we slowly start to populate these empty worlds, right, that like what John mentioned, where do we see the future of brands in this case, especially that of currently existing consumer brands that we all know and love, right? Where do we see them coming in, and how do they, will they still survive? Will they exist still in the metaverse? Yeah, I think these are some questions that, I'm personally very curious about.
Okay, I can go first on this one. Well, there's a lot of layers to this question, and maybe in the short amount of time that we have, we're not going to be able to cover every point. But I do want to say that from where I sit, the metaverse is nothing more than just a concept, right? It doesn't really represent holistically enough the promise of what Web3 can do. And this has kind of created a sort of problem in itself, because in a lot of our clients or brands' mind, we're starting to see an assumption that the metaverse automatically equates to virtual worlds. And the danger in that is we end up having all these virtual worlds that are not populated by people. A lot of money gets wasted. Everyone is just trying to do the same thing and recreate the same thing and recreate the wheel, right? The metaverse in itself, as a concept, actually means a lot more things, right? The technology enables stuff that we've just discussed, tokens, accessibility, fan communities, fan engagement. And what happens now, from where I sit at least, is we're getting a situation whereby we have brands who are really falling under two main camps. One, they just want to plant their flag in the metaverse, for lack of a better term here, which is to demonstrate that they're doing something, they're being culturally relevant, they get their communities, or it could also be seen as sort of experimental playing ground to test things. Whether or not that actually turns into a virtual interactive experience, that's a different topic altogether. The other side of the business, or rather the other side of the equation, is we have people who are looking at what a metaverse strategy means to them in a much longer time frame, which means they are looking at the individual elements of Web3 as a whole and how it can affect their business lines. How does it affect their CRM? How does it affect their ability to onboard new customers into the business? How do they create loyalty? How do we get people more involved and play a more active role? I know a lot of the times, and this is something which people constantly wax lyrical about, we have to be authentic in the way that we talk to our customers. I don't even know what that means, because what are you being authentic about? Are you being authentic to yourself as a brand and what you stand for? Or are you being authentic by listening to what your customers want? Because you'll find that most of the time, what people want is not what you can provide, right? There are very few cases in which, at the moment at least, and I'm not going to ramble, where we have clients who have adopted the second route, whereby, and this is the route which I'm personally trying to guide my clients on, and which is a mind of experimentation, a willingness to try new things and be willing to fail, aligned to a learning agenda, which is obviously discussed in tandem on how we're going to eventually get there. The steps that we may take may be much longer than anticipated, but it's not towards building a virtual world, right? Because then we fall into the trap of assuming that that's what people want, and that if we build it, people will come. And I think it's evident enough in all the unpopulated worlds out there that that's not what people think the metaverse is. If not, there'll be people who are engaging in that space. So yeah, that's kind of where my head is at when it comes to your question on brands in the metaverse. Do they have a role to play? Yes, but maybe not in the form of a virtual world, so to speak.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think one thing you mentioned in particular is I like the idea of authenticity, and whether that is looking from the lens of being true to the brand itself and what the brand values versus what the consumer wants, which honestly can be a bit blurred sometimes. But I really want to touch on what you mentioned earlier about, I think, the idea of building, right? And the, how do I put this? Basically the idea of building something that is, I think, more instead of building the same concepts, instead of building the exact same thing that everyone is doing, innovating something that is actually useful, something that actually is maybe something not entirely cognizant of the entire Web3 in particular, but building out the architecture of it at the end of the day, right? And I actually wanted to ask Danny, if you have any inputs on this, because on the product side, you deal a lot with people building out all these use cases every day. Do you see all these things as similar, or are they real innovations that I think blow your mind, so to speak? I mean, I'm not sure if you can share them, but some alpha would be good.
Just to make an overarching statement, I do think that a majority of consumer-facing brands that specialize in shopping and specialty products need to have some sort of presence in virtual worlds. But I agree with JF that I don't believe that this means that every brand needs to be building their own world, right? Because I do think that there's going to be a graveyard of entire worlds that are empty, right? Because they built it thinking that people would come, but maybe the use cases, it doesn't actually necessarily look very far into the future. And also, to be clear, I don't think that every Web2 brand needs to adapt or die, but I just think that there's just valuable consumer focus that's just being ignored otherwise. Just as we saw a major shift in time spent on social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, etc. The more time that consumers spend in virtual worlds, wherever that means, right? That just means that there is valuable attention and engagement and awareness that is just not being captured by brands. And I think over the past 6 months, I have seen a pretty major shift in brands that are willing to do this experimentation that JF is talking about, right? Whether that means just starting those conversations with certain agencies, or actually fully iterating, maybe just not as publicly, right? Doing just smaller type experiences, just so they can test the ways that consumers respond to their brand in different virtual environments.
Yeah, no, I think these conversations are really important for sure. Because I mean, it's pretty much impossible to expect a brand to go from 0 to 100 in a day. That's not possible, especially when they are, larger. They are made up of larger entities, and many stakeholders are involved in the decision making process. I think this actually is a question that I wanted to pose to Petromil as well, right? That coming from Volkswagen Group, where you guys control 13 over different brands, right? How did you guys even make that pivot to even start iterating and having, I think, that mind of experimentation to try new things, especially in this new era that we're looking at?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer right away, but we have the following way to think about it. Currently we try to structure everything around 3 different stages. And the first one is actually purely focused on core business, more or less what Danielle mentioned. So we have to have a presence in virtual worlds. Yeah, we have to be able to make sure that we connect with, for example, Gen Z there. We need to be able to open new sales channels, new awareness campaigns on these platforms in order to drive our current business. Yeah, as simple as that. This is the first and probably the most obvious, but nonetheless not an easy stage, coming from very traditional industry. The second level of engagement is really looking into, and by the way, maybe I could give a couple of examples, but I personally like a lot of Hyundai or Roblox world. So they actually have a showroom, they have various gameplay, they have demonstration of new technologies, but also the likes of Gucci and Samsung are doing very similar scope of work there. And the second level would be where you really start moving towards virtual goods, and you're able to monetize your IP in the virtual world itself. Be it because you have a specific designs, you want to recreate a specific experience, which is now outside of the virtual worlds, but you can be able to put it into that one. And this is something that probably is very easy to be understood, in terms of fashion, where you see the likes of Ralph Lauren, for example, already selling and promoting a digital clothing line, for example. And the next and probably the highest level we think about it is we're looking actually a hybrid continuum between virtual and physical, yeah? Especially if you think about mobility or engagement into the metaverse and then outside, the question is where actually the real world stops and the virtual world starts and vice versa, right? So can actually connect into seamless journeys my customers across physical and digital, yeah, and how this is going to work and what's going to be the economics around this. So these are the 3 levels we think about, but at the moment, I think most of the brands are really trying to make sure that they go into this first core level and execute it in a meaningful way for the customers. This is where we are standing at the moment, and I believe the whole industry as a whole.
Yeah, thanks for that, Petromil. I would like to open the floor to questions, but I think while waiting for people to send those in, I actually really like what you said about how brands at the core of it, they're actually trying to do something that is engaging to the customer, that value adds to the customer, right? And I think between the 3 of you, I think you guys would be the best few people to answer. What are some tips or ways I think brands can actually employ to make their entry into this industry a lot easier? Is there something that they have to do while conceptualizing the product, or does it come from having the actual conversations with the stakeholders on the ground first, the actual users? I would love to hear your thoughts on those.
Yeah, maybe I could start with some very simple message, which has not changed if you're developing products for the real world or for the metaverse. It's start with your customers. I mean, I see a lot of teams start with how you could use NFTs and what the role of metaverse should be. But in the end, what we want to provide is a very clear value proposition for the customers. Yeah, and actually addressing customer pain points, adding value to the current customer journeys is something is a point where we would like to start, making sure that we iterate with customers in order to be able to create these experiences we are aiming for. Yeah, even if the experiences are new in nature, you could still address this with, for example, extreme users, early adopters, and so on. So there are a lot of ways in which you could approach this topic, not necessarily starting from a technology point of view. And the second point is, I'm just touching on what JF mentioned before, is that you need to think in continuum, which is mid to long term, right? Beyond the entered airdrop of NFTs. So how all these things hang together? Because as we could potentially end up having a graveyard of metaverses or virtual worlds, you could also end up with a graveyard of having NFTs around with utility, which is probably not as relevant as it used to be when they were when they originated. Yeah. So the point is actually how we as a brand make sure that whatever you create and once it's out there, it remains relevant and connects to the things that you launch afterwards. And this is what we would call NFT/metaverse strategies or roadmaps, as much as you'll be able to design around them.
Yeah, I mean, agree. And just to build on to your points, I think, and to answer the question, of course, it's always a tricky thing to answer when clients basically ask the same question of where should we start, right? And I think, by and large, it really is a cold start problem because we don't know what we don't know, and the clients doesn't know what they don't know either. And it's always a long process in aligning what is it they want to do to what is actually possible. So I'll just speak about the way that we hold our clients' hands, so to speak, because maybe that will provide some sort of context in terms of where I'm going with this answer. I think it's very important for, together with our brands, for them to understand what kind of role they're going to play, right? I mean, to build off the points that Danielle and Petromil already has said, as an entry level, as an experience, definitely if the investment is available, it does make sense for a brand to dip their toes into creating an access or a place for their communities together. It also could be a very rich territory to introduce new ways for people to interact with the brand that they have never done so before, create more intimate settings, enable your fans or your communities to participate. I mean, we've spent the last 10 years on social media talking about how we need to talk to our customers. Now we actually have an avenue to do that. But isn't it amusing that no brands have been able to still do that? And I guess that comes down to the role of the brand and what they want to do in the metaverse, right? I mean, is the brand is it an enabler of experiences that sits outside the products that they're selling? Are they bringing different fan communities together? Are we turning their goods into digital goods, which then enables a different model of commerce? I think these are all questions in which a lot of our clients are unable to answer because they don't know what's out there and what's possible, right? And I think one of the biggest challenge that we have, or what I have, is at the moment is we have a lot of examples of successful experiences that people have created, right? Roblox is full of it. Decentraland is full of it. We have some very successful NFT communities like the Bored Apes and Yuga Labs, Crypto Punks. There's a lot of use cases out there. There's a lot of very great case studies out there as well. But what those things do not do is help their clients understand how that is applicable to their business, because the business model that they're trying to use is still very much a Web2 model. And this is a real challenge for any brands that's trying to enter the metaverse. If you're trying to replicate what you're doing in Web2, in Web3, you're already starting off the wrong foot. If you're trying to sell more products in Web3, why don't you just stick to what you're already doing in Web2? There's absolutely no reason for you to try and sell the same thing in Web3, right? So what we are trying to do, and this comes back to the learning agenda which I shared, is develop this new business model that can help thrive in the Web3 metaverse space, which is completely separate from what they're already doing in Web2. A very good example of a brand that does this really well is actually Budweiser. They were one of the first few major FMCG brands, so to speak, to announce their interest in the metaverse. And it's very brave of them, and they did it in a very brave fashion. If I remember correctly, they bought a Ethereum address called beer.eth. And you know what happens when you do that, right? It's on the blockchain, it's accessible, anyone can see it. The moment they started announcing that this is their sort of foray into Web3, they put themselves out there. They didn't define what their role was. They just simply was present. And a lot of amusing things happened out of that. Because the wallet was accessible to everyone, people started sending all sorts of shit to their wallet. Weird NFTs. Some of them were vulgar. Some of them were extremely amusing. But it was a very authentic way into, or rather an example of how a brand has decided to take a step into the metaverse. From there, they started building and listening to what the community wants, and everything that they're currently doing in the space doesn't give you a sense that they're trying to get people to buy more beer. What they are doing is enabling a different experience, which comes with how you would normally enjoy a beer. They are hosting virtual live concerts. They're bringing people together. They're creating networking. A lot of confluence with what you would think about when you're at a bar in real life, but trying to bring that into the metaverse as well, right? One more example before I stop talking. A couple of days ago, I don't know if you guys saw the news. Web3.0 United investment company in the States just bought over a football club. I think the football club is called Crawley United or something like that. This is also a very interesting use case right there, because what they did was really understand what people wanted, football fans wanted. And any football fan in the room or who's listening would at some point would have played Football Manager. Everyone aspires to be, to run a football team, to make decisions about how the club is being run, how the players are going to play, get a share of managing the club. And that's exactly what this project does. They're democratizing access to the world of football by allowing people to own a piece of a club and get involved in the decision making, and that's really identifying what their fans wanted or what the human psychology wanted, or the behavior, and trying to capture that in a Web3 manner. It's very challenging for a lot of big global brands to do that. But we will get there. Yeah.
No, yeah. I think honestly, what everyone has mentioned today, about knowing your customer, about knowing what the value is, about knowing that, Web3 is not just a new business opportunity. It's actually a new, I want to say generation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to embark on it immediately. I especially like the example on Budweiser, because when they had that ETH address, it was like, wow, what are they going to do? And everyone was so excited, but it doesn't mean that, they're using it just as a way to just sell more things to the consumers, right? At the end of the day, you can see the difference in attitudes and mentalities across the board in how people approach Web3. And I think that's what gets me excited at the end of the day. How can we help more brands, more companies and more organizations make that pivot without having it to be ingenuine? At the end of the day, I think that's the most important value we're looking to espouse at the end of the, with everything that's going on right now. I think with that, I would like to thank everyone for attending the panel. Honestly, really good thoughts and insights shared by all three of you. So thanks so much for making the time to share your learnings with us. I would just like to take it back to I think Blockplay. Thanks so much for having us here as well. We're really, really excited, and we had a good time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, panelists, JF, Danny, Petromil, and Tricia for moderating the session. I definitely had a lot of takeaways coming from an agency standpoint, and I hope you guys did too. Once again, for folks who have joined our live session only now, the content will be uploaded for catch-up for 2 weeks after today. Do feel free to